how exactly do Australian artists and musicians break through in 2025? I'm going to attempt to answer that in this video here. Hey everyone, Liam from Solitude here. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm talking about how Australian artists and musicians can break through so they become noticed in the mainstream in 2025. Now, for musicians, this is often a topic that people love to talk about and discuss, and to put their opinions out there as to why they think that they're not breaking through and why they think other artists have broken through. I think before we delve into that though, actually, we should look a little bit back on the past and see how artists broke through in Australia over history. So obviously contemporary music as we know it really started to break through as a mainstream media when the rock and roll era came about in the 50s and 60s. Australia was obviously part of this, along with America, England, and parts of Europe, being those countries in Western modern culture. And we had our artists who were able to break through in the early stages, and that was usually through two main media sources: radio and television. And of course, one of the tried and true methods that still works to this day: playing local live shows. So once we hit about the 70s, we had a very strong media source that was pushing artists forward to get attention in the mainstream and underground music scenes in Australia. There was obviously a lot of major radio stations that did this, but really, in my opinion, I think the pinnacle was a television show called Countdown. Countdown was able to gather together all of the artists, musicians, and bands that were having success locally in their music scenes, playing live shows, getting played on radio stations, and just becoming part of the media zeitgeist in Australia. We had artists the likes of John Farnham, AC/DC, Kylie Minogue, Olivia Newton-John, INXS, just to name a few, all participate in this television show called Countdown, where they were able to push themselves further and become mainstream successes as musicians. It almost seemed that Countdown really was the only way you could get the crowning jewel on your mainstream success as an artist in Australia, and they were essentially the biggest gatekeeper of the 70s and 80s. They also had a lot of labels that were helping push artists towards Countdown and towards radio stations as well, so labels were always a very big factor back then too. Once it hit the 90s, we saw a really strange thing happen all over the world, not just in Australia, but there was a big flip from mainstream and underground, where essentially Nirvana and the grunge boom, when it came through, it made everything that was uncool cool, and everything that was cool was now uncool. We saw this happening in Australia too, following this kind of grunge boom, with bands like UMI, Silverchair, Powderfinger all becoming the darlings of the music industry here in Australia, despite not actually craving mainstream success. It was the alternative and the underground which began to become more popular and more respected amongst music communities. And we also saw the emergence of a nationwide radio station that was specifically funded by the government to help push forward Australian artists and musicians, and this of course was Triple J. And now getting played on Triple J essentially became the new gatekeeper of Australian music success. Everyone wanted to get played on that station because you got put into the ears of every Australian all over the country that was tuning in. It was a huge deal. We also saw the emergence of music festivals and events really taking it to the next level, such as the Big Day Out. Then once we hit the 2000s, the emergence of the internet and internet culture started taking over. We saw the beginnings of social media becoming the new way of spreading music with a website called MySpace. And Triple J was able to adapt quite well to this, creating a website called Triple J Unearthed, which was kind of like a little mini Australian MySpace for up-and-coming underground and indie artists in this country. It honestly was a brilliant idea, and for a long time, it was a great way to find new music anywhere over the country. We saw the emergence of artists like Flume, Courtney Barnett, Boy and Bear, Ballpark Music, The Jezebels, San Cisco, just to name a few, come through this Triple J Unearthed website, where presenters of Triple J would find their music that the artist had uploaded and then play it to Australian music fans, who would then discover it on the Triple J radio station. This was a brilliant method, and it really took out the middleman, so you didn't exactly need labels to push you forward to Triple J anymore. You could just put your music out there, and if it was good enough, you may well get picked up. I should also reiterate that the tried and true method of playing local live shows and pushing yourself forward through word of mouth was still an important factor here. Probably the last huge success story that pushed themselves forward in Australia through local live shows and word of mouth only would actually be Sticky Fingers. Now, a lot of people may not realize this because Triple J and Sticky Fingers have had a long and troubled history, but they actually had a lot of success through word of mouth and through live shows without Triple J attention at all. They even went on a podcast one time to explain what was happening with them when it came to their relationship with Triple J before they were played on that station a lot. Here's what they said about how Triple J didn't actually want to play them at all for a long time.
In the first 2 or 3 times that we took our own singles in, like, it was just sort of like, name, Sticky Fingers, like, yeah, and he'd like put it on top of the pile. Eventually we got a 3-word reply from Kingsmill after single 4 or 5, which was How to Fly, and his email to us was, it's too reggae.
And what we saw here with Sticky Fingers was something interesting, and it became a little bit of a trend, which I'm going to talk about later on. They were able to push themselves forward so hard, and without Triple J's help, that it meant that they were voted on to Triple J's Hottest 100 with their own following and their own crowd that enjoyed them, who didn't find them on Triple J. And it meant that Triple J essentially had to succumb to what was happening in the music scene. Even though Triple J didn't think that reggae music was good enough to play on their station, in my opinion, I think this was probably like the first sort of windbreaker situation like this, where an artist forced their way onto Triple J in the internet era. But something that set them apart to the other artists I'm going to speak about was that they really did it through word of mouth and live shows, and not so much the internet yet. Around the middle of the 2010s, we really saw streaming services and social media just take over the music industry. Triple J still had a strong following and they were still going pretty well, but it started to become evident that they were missing artists that were building huge followings online. And some of the first big artists that built followings online without basically any Triple J attention at all are ironically 3 of the biggest Triple J pushed artists nowadays, and they are Spacey Jane, Lime Cordiale, and Ocean Alley. Now, I had this discussion on the Triple J Reddit page a couple of months ago about this, because I was interested to see what people thought about it and what people knew. But it was kind of interesting to see that a lot of people didn't really understand what I was saying, or maybe disagreed with me, or were just completely unaware that those 3 bands that I previously mentioned, Spacey Jane, Lime Cordiale, and Ocean Alley, all had huge followings without any Triple J attention for some period of time. You see, by around 2016, 17-ish, streaming platforms like Spotify had basically taken over radio. And some of these artists were getting millions upon millions of plays without Triple J wanting to play them on their station. They may have gotten a few spot plays here or there at nighttime, but anyone who follows Triple J trends or the Australian music industry knows that if you get played once every 2 or 3 months on Triple J, it doesn't actually really do anything for your following moving forward unless you are getting high or heavy rotation. It might be like a little nice touch to get played once and every now and then on that station, but it just didn't really give you enough to get that one-off play. Just one quick point that I remembered while I was editing this, Triple J Unearthed also have a radio station that they use to promote new and up-and-coming music. So some of these artists that I've mentioned also did get played on that Triple J Unearthed radio station, which is only available via digital, and you can't get it on analog radio stations, so it didn't have near as much clout, and still does not have near as much clout as the original Triple J platform. So yes, they were getting a bit of attention on the Triple J Unearthed radio station, but did that really help, and did that really help to propel their careers forward as much as what streaming was? No, in my opinion, it didn't. And that's exactly what was happening with Spacey Jane, Lime Cordiale, and Ocean Alley. Now, I must admit, Lime Cordiale is probably the one artist of these three that I don't know as much about, but I remember when they first started getting a little bit more airtime on Triple J with the song Dirt Cheap, and I remember hearing it and thinking, oh, that's cool. And then I was shocked to see when their song was voted into the hottest 100 that year, considering it wasn't high up on the warm tuners and it didn't get that much airtime. So then when I looked into it, I saw they actually had a huge Spotify following, and many of their songs were actually over 1 million streams already. And this was one of the first times where I was like, what's actually happening here? Then if we look at Ocean Alley, something similar was happening. Now, I remember a lot of people discussing in local music scenes and the community radio station that I volunteered at the time, disdain for Triple J for not playing Ocean Alley for a long time. There was a belief that Sticky Fingers were the one reggae band that they wanted to give attention to, and there was no one else. And Ocean Alley were kind of copying that sound a little bit, and it appeared to be like there was no room for Ocean Alley on their airwaves as well. But, you know, in the background, they were actually building a huge following on streaming and social media. And eventually the same thing happened. Their song, The Come Down, which wasn't really played on the station a whole lot, then got voted into a Hottest 100. Now, Spacey Jane, I've followed pretty much since the beginning because I was volunteering at a community radio station when they started as a band. I remember when they made their first uploads to Triple J Unearthed, and myself and some of my fellow community radio presenters loved to play their early music from their first EP, and there was a lot of rave about them in the local West Australian scene where I'm from for a long time. They were clearly the most popular local band for a couple of years, and there was a lot of disdain pushed towards Triple J for them not playing Spacey Jane for a good couple of years. And the same thing happened with them. A few of their songs were over 1 million streams on Spotify. They weren't really getting a lot of airtime on Triple J, maybe a little bit here or there. And then what do you know? Good For You was eventually voted in to a Hottest 100. Now, these three experiences were all very similar because they all kind of did something that Sticky Fingers did previously, where their followings were so big that they forced their way onto Triple J. And it wasn't necessarily Triple J choosing these artists, it was the fan bases pushing them onto the station. Now, while this was happening with these three cases, we still had plenty of great unearthed success stories to talk about that were happening, such as Ruby Fields, Middle Kids, G-Flip, Tones and I, even to some degree. See, something that these artists shared in common was that they uploaded their first song to Triple J Unearthed, and it was picked up straight away and given heavy rotation straight away. It was like this grand, great success story where it's like, hey, I'm this artist, we just started as a band, or I just started putting out music, I just uploaded it to Triple J Unearthed, and what do you know, the station loved it so much that they just started playing it straight away. Now, I'm this overnight success story. And it was like we had so many of these stories for a good 10 or 15 years. But slowly over time, that sort of story seems to be eroded away. Since about 2020, it feels to me like we don't see anything like these sort of Ruby Fields, G-Flip stories at all anymore, where overnight successes are just getting picked up from Unearthed and played straight away. The blueprint right now is really in that 3 artist model which I spoke about, the Spacey Jane, Lime Cordiale, and Ocean Alley blueprint, where you work tirelessly in the background, playing local shows, building a following through word of mouth, building your streaming game on Spotify, and also your social media game. And one of the more recent success stories that have kind of followed this Spacey Jane blueprint is another band from Western Australia called Old Mervs. You see, if you just listened to Triple J and you didn't really consume anything about the Australian music industry on social media or Spotify, you'd probably think that Triple J had, unearthed this great surf rock duo from Western Australia and finally given them their go and, helped them break out. But it actually is not really true, you see. Old Mervs worked tirelessly away for a good 4 or 5 years before they got any attention on Triple J, and they really did follow a similar path to the 3 previous artists that I mentioned. So they probably started around like 2017, 18, playing local live shows, building a following through word of mouth. They recorded their first few songs, uploaded them to Spotify, and of course, Triple J Unearthed, where I believe they were completely ignored. And around 2020, the band started to kind of take off a little more in the local live scene here in Perth because of the really strong indie bar scene in Scarborough. Their streaming game also picked up a lot, especially with their song Cell Phone, which became their first Spotify success, hitting over 1 million streams. See, getting in the Spotify algorithm and getting one of your songs over 1 million streams really is the show of success these days, and it tells people that that band or artist is being followed and listened to. So without any attention on Triple J at all, maybe a couple of spot plays, I think, one of their songs was voted in really high in the Hottest 100 count, but not quite in the 100. It hit about 120 or 130, I believe, and it was their song Where I Go. So this was another case of the fans pushing the song forward without really hearing the song on Triple J at all. And then Triple J became aware of them, of course, because so many people voted for them, and then they started playing them on high and heavy rotation. And of course, getting played on Triple J has helped this artist a lot. It's helped them go to the next level, as it did for Spacey Jane, Ocean Alley, and Lime Cordiale. See, I'm not saying that Triple J don't help expand the following of these bands, because they sure well do, but they don't really help them break through nowadays. It really is their own efforts, pushing themselves on social media, the algorithm, and Spotify that is breaking through these artists now. And I think it really kind of comes down to, in my opinion, essentially a change of language. You see, in the past, when a new artist was played on Triple J after they uploaded their song to Unearthed and they were essentially plucked out of nowhere and given an overnight success story, the language went something like this. Hey, I just found this artist and they put up their first song on Triple J Unearthed yesterday and it's awesome. You guys need to hear it. I want to make sure the world knows Ruby Fields. Whereas nowadays, over the past sort of 5 years, I feel like we don't hear these sorts of stories hardly at all anymore. And the language is more sort of like this. Hey, this artist has been killing it locally in the live music scene. They also have a great streaming game and social media following. Now we should probably be playing them because you all have probably heard them before on Spotify. Of course, they don't admit that, but really, that's what's happening. So essentially, that is how you break through as an artist in 2025. Gone are the days where Triple J are the gatekeeper. You do not need to be making music with a desire to be getting played on Triple J anymore. Of course, it will help you if you get played on that station, and it will give you what I call a good cherry on top experience. But you do not need them to break through any longer. And with this, I would probably say that there are some good things and bad things about it. The good being that the control of your destiny is more in your own hands. You see, before streaming and social media got really big, it felt like Triple J were gatekeeping and strongholding all the artists that they wanted to give success to. And I remember back when I was doing my community radio, there was a lot of discussion about this, that Triple J were assholes because they were gatekeepers, but it's not really true anymore. They're not gatekeeping anything, really. It just means that you have to work a bit harder on your own streaming game, your own knowledge of the algorithms. your own social media. You're probably got to film yourself and put it on TikTok, and you're probably going to cringe while you're doing it. But hey, at least you can do that yourself, and you can try to make as much content as possible that can grow you over time. Constantly sending your work to Triple J or uploading it to Unearthed felt like you were kind of getting blocked and never getting heard, and you had no feedback, so that's better, I guess. Although, in my opinion, the bad is we no longer get any of these overnight success stories, which were really cool to hear about. And it is now just kind of like the algorithm picking and pushing everything forward, and Triple J just being like an outlet of all the artists which have been pushed the hardest in the algorithm. So from my experience, and I do look into a lot the statistics and the streams and what songs are getting played on Triple J. I follow the warm tuners and the hottest 100 counts. I'm a real nerd for this sort of stuff, and in my opinion, like, if you're an aspiring musician here in Australia and you're making new music and you want to get attention, you want to build a following, I would still recommend that you upload your song to Unearthed, but I wouldn't expect that song to be listened to by Triple J presenters on there, especially when you just start out. You should really be focusing on getting your song pushed in the Spotify algorithm. In my opinion, it's not really until you start to show evident signs of streaming success or social media success that Triple J presenters will start to interact with your Unearthed page. I mean, if I was a presenter at Triple J, yeah, I might look at the Unearthed page every now and then, but I mean, in all honesty, everything you need now as a music presenter is on Spotify. You can find every artist in the world, including every Australian artist, on there. So I'd just be going through there, and their recommendation lists are usually pretty good. The algorithm puts all kind of related artists together really well, so the job is made easier for them on Spotify instead of Unearthed. I guess overall though, the one thing that Triple J and Unearthed in particular still do really well with their overnight success story is the Unearthed High competition. Now, this is a competition they run once a year for high school students, where you can upload your song to Unearthed and they pick maybe about 5 or 6 finalists of songs that were uploaded by high school students that year, and they decide, you know, what they think the best songs were, who the best artists were, and they pick a winner every year. And there've been some really cool success stories from Unearthed over the years. The most recent one would obviously be the Ryons, who won the competition a few years ago, and are now one of the great up-and-coming indie rock bands in this country. They're really kind of like one of the few success stories that Triple J have found and pushed in the last 5 years. It feels like most artists now are finding their success on Spotify and social media, TikTok, Instagram Reels, places like that, and then eventually Triple J pick them up. So if you're an artist and you want to break through in 2025 and you're from Australia, don't worry so much about Triple J. Hey, hopefully maybe you get played on there at one point, but work on your streaming game. Make content for TikTok and Instagram and relate it to your music. And the more you do that, the more you can build over time. And maybe one day something might go viral. You never know. So really, that's what it comes down to now. And it's probably the same all over the world as well. Thanks for watching my video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more stuff about Australian music, please like and subscribe, and come back for my next video soon. See ya.